I am a physics teacher by trade. My life is orderly, rational, and grounded in logic. Sharing this story is not something I do lightly. I write anonymously, not because of fear or shame, but because this isn't about me. It's about an experience, one I still struggle to understand. It began on a night like any other. I went to bed at my usual time, my thoughts preoccupied with grading papers and planning lessons for the week. The routine was familiar, comforting even, and there was no reason to expect anything unusual. But at some point in the night, I woke abruptly, my breath hitching in my chest. For a moment, I wasn't sure why I had woken up. The room was dark and still, with the faint hum of the heater in the background. Then, I felt it. I couldn't move. My body was pinned to the bed, frozen in place by an invisible force. My arms, my legs, even my chest, all were held down as though a tremendous weight pressed against me. Worse, something was wrapped around my throat. It felt like hands, cold, unyielding, and terrifyingly real, tightening with each passing second. Gasping for air, I struggled to scream, but no sound escaped my mouth. My heart pounded in my chest as my mind reeled in panic. The burning in my lungs intensified, and every instinct screamed at me to fight, to break free, but I couldn't. And then I felt it. Something was there with me, close enough that I could feel its presence pressing against my face. Though I couldn't see it, I could sense it looming over me, its breath shallow and deliberate, chilling my skin. It carried a foul, acrid scent, like something decayed and wrong. It was an intimate violation, as if this unseen entity had breached every boundary, invading the space I thought was mine. In those moments, time seemed to stretch endlessly. My mind raced for an explanation, but nothing made sense. Was this sleep paralysis, a nightmare, or something far worse? Then, just as suddenly as it began, it stopped. The grip on my throat vanished, the weight pinning my body lifted, and I was free. I bolted upright, clutching my neck and gasping for air as though I had been drowning. The room was exactly as it had been when I went to sleep, quiet, untouched, and unnervingly normal. My chest heaved as I tried to steady my breathing, my mind searching desperately for an explanation. Sleep paralysis, I told myself. It had to be some strange glitch of the brain, the kind of thing that happens when you're caught between sleeping and waking. That reasoning comforted me just enough to lie back down, though I didn't fall asleep for hours. When I finally did, it was uneasy and restless, with a gnawing fear I couldn't shake. At the time, I had no idea this was only the beginning. The second incident occurred about a week later. I remember it vividly because it left marks, literal marks, on my body. Again, I had gone to bed at my usual time, no different from any other night. This time, I woke up not because of a choking sensation, but because of a sharp, stinging pain across my chest. In my half-asleep state, I initially thought I had scratched myself somehow. But as I became fully awake, I realized the pain wasn't isolated to my chest. It was on my back as well. I sat up and turned on the light, immediately pulling up my shirt to inspect my skin. What I saw still disturbs me. There were scratches, 3 distinct parallel lines, running diagonally across my chest. I could feel similar marks on my back when I reached around to touch. They were fresh enough to sting, but not deep enough to bleed. There was no explanation for how they got there. I had gone to bed alone, and nothing in my bed or clothing could have caused them. That night, fear began to settle in, a cold, creeping realization that this was not just a random event or a trick of the mind. Something was targeting me, something unseen. I didn't know what it was or why it had chosen me, but the evidence was undeniable. I considered telling someone, a friend, a colleague, but what would I say? That I had woken up with scratches I couldn't explain? That I thought something invisible was attacking me? A physics teacher relying on logic and evidence would sound ridiculous describing such a thing, and so I kept it to myself, hoping that whatever this was would simply stop. But it didn't stop. If anything, it got worse. The third and final encounter was the most horrifying of all. It happened just 3 nights after the second attack. By this point, I was sleeping poorly, haunted by the memories of what had already occurred and the dread of what might happen next. I had begun sleeping with the light on, thinking it might help. It didn't. I woke abruptly in the middle of the night, this time not to choking or pain, but to the sensation of being dragged. My legs were already off the bed, and I could feel a force, strong, unrelenting, gripping me around my waist and pulling me downward. My mind reeled with panic as I struggled against it, clawing at the mattress and gripping the edges of my bed frame. That's when I heard it, a voice, deep, guttural, and menacing. I cannot recall the exact words, but the meaning was clear. If it succeeded in pulling me to the floor, it was going to maul me. The voice felt like it wasn't just heard, but resonated inside my skull, shaking me to my core. In sheer desperation, I did the only thing I could think of. I called out to God. I hadn't prayed in years, but in that moment, as the force dragged me closer to the edge, I pleaded with him for protection, begging to be saved from whatever was attacking me. And then, as suddenly as it began, it stopped. The grip vanished, and I fell back onto the bed, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst. The room was silent, still, and eerily normal, as though nothing had happened, but I knew it had. The pulling sensation disappeared completely, as though a switch had been flipped. The weight of the force holding me vanished, and the room fell into an unsettling silence. For a moment, I lay there frozen, unsure if it was truly over or if it was simply waiting for me to let my guard down. But nothing else happened. I sat up slowly, trembling from head to toe, and looked around the room. Everything was as it had been. There was no sign of an intruder, no evidence that anything extraordinary had taken place, aside from the fact that I was unharmed and no longer under attack. Shaken but unharmed, I stayed awake for the rest of the night, unable to close my eyes without seeing that moment again. The voice, the force, the sheer malice I had felt, it all lingered in my mind. And yet, I couldn't deny that the prayer, for whatever reason, had worked. Since that night, there have been no more attacks. I have slept in the same bed, in the same room, night after night, waiting for something to happen, but nothing has. It's been months now, and though I still feel uneasy at times, the overwhelming sense of dread has finally lifted. I don't claim to know what I experienced. I have no way of proving it, no evidence to offer beyond the scratches that have long since healed and the memory of being pulled off my bed. But I do know this: the attack stopped when I prayed. Let me be clear, I'm not here to preach. I'm not trying to convert anyone or suggest that my solution is the answer for everyone. I'm simply sharing what worked for me. When I called out to God in that moment of terror, the force that attacked me vanished, and it has not returned. Now I know who protects me, and it has had a very positive effect on my spiritual life. I know it might sound contradictory, but I remain a rational man, a physics teacher who believes in evidence and logic. Yet, this experience defies both. It was real to me, and while I may never fully understand it, I can't deny the role prayer played in ending it. I share this not as a lesson, but as a story, a strange, terrifying chapter of my life that I hope never repeats itself. If nothing else, perhaps it will resonate with someone who has faced something similar and felt just as helpless. For now, my life has returned to normal, and I intend to keep it that way. If you decide to share this story, I only ask that you do so anonymously. Thank you. If you found this story intriguing, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to our channel, and hit the bell icon so you never miss our latest uploads. Share your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear your take. Thanks for watching.